What's up, guys? This is Paco, the Realtor, broker owner of RX Real Estate. I'm here with David Lau, owner of Riverside Mortgage.
How are you? Thanks for inviting me.
And as you guys have seen, David is one of my go-to guys when it comes to knowledge and information. And today we're talking about something that I preach and preach and preach and preach, and I can't preach it enough. And I'm not talking about the 10 Commandments. I am talking about know your freaking numbers before you go buy a house. Yeah. Do not give me a call and say, Paco, I want to go look at some houses, but I don't want anybody to run my credit. And if I find the right house, then run my credit. Yeah. Why? Yeah. When you walk into a house, you want to know exactly what your payment's going to be, how much down you need, how much you need in closing costs, and whether it makes sense. Other than that, you're guessing. So, know your numbers. So I brought David on to talk about how do I get to know my numbers, David?
Well, that's a really important thing. Actually, I think it's the most crucial thing that a lot of people forget. People say, "Oh, I have this much for a down payment," which is great. Say I have $100,000, but that's only part of the equation. And I tell people when you buy a house, it's like a baseball game. With baseball games, there's a lot of statistics. You can have ERA, RBI, and all those numbers. How many home runs you're batting and stuff like that. Same thing with buying a home and getting financing. You need to know your stats. FICO score is just one of them. And the other types of numbers you need to know are your DTI, your monthly payment.
Debt to income ratio.
Yeah, debt to income ratio. And basically also your rental income. So a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today in terms of what stats you need to know.
Right. Okay. So let's get right into it.
Yeah.
So I went on Credit Karma because I saw one of your videos.
Thank you.
And
you were in it?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I remember. And right after that, I went on Credit Karma to make sure my credit was still good.
How was it?
We're golden. All right. So Credit Karma says I have a 700 FICO score. Mm-hmm. I have a good job. I got 2 years tax returns. I'm a first-time buyer. I think rents are going up, so I'm tired of paying it, and I keep hearing the only way to stop rents from going up is to buy a house because your mortgage never changes.
That's correct.
So I call you, David, and I say, I'm ready. Mm-hmm. What do I need?
So, Paco, you talked about it earlier with Credit Karma. Is basically Credit Karma in our other video that we talked about is a great tool. You got to know your FICO score. Your FICO score, just like going back to the baseball analogy, it gets you into the game. You got to know where your starting point is. And it's okay if you don't know. That's why you get Credit Karma. Although Credit Karma's score is not the score that we use, but it does at least help you in terms of getting prepared to know what your credit report's going to look like, what your history's like. And I'm pretty sure you kind of already know, even before you apply for Credit Karma, what your FICO scores are going to be.
Right.
So,
and real quick, one of the common questions I get is, I want to buy a house, but I don't have good credit. And I always say, well, what does that mean? And half the time they're like, well, I only got a 680.
That's right.
Well, it's good enough. What do you mean you don't have good enough? Yeah. So that's just part of the factor. So continue.
So with the FICO scores, depending on your FICO score and the loan program and the lender you're going to go with, we all have different scores to get you into the game. For example, believe it or not, FHA really doesn't have a FICO score, but most lenders minimum is 580. Same thing with conventional. It all depends on the lender and their loan program. But a rule of thumb is usually 620 gets you in the game with a conventional. And if you're doing VA, believe it or not, VA doesn't even have a FICO score requirement. It all depends on the lender. Now, obviously, they're going to want you to see a certain score in order to invite you to the table. With most VA lenders, they're going to want to see anywhere from 620 or higher. But then again, we have lenders that don't really care about your FICO score. They look at your overall financials. So FICO score, again, it just gets you into the game. It doesn't mean you're going to play, but it just gets you into the game.
Okay, so I'm in the stadium now. Mm-hmm. I'm in the game. My FICO's good enough. Mm-hmm. What other numbers do I need?
The next number you're going to need is when us as lenders, when we run your credit, part of the pre-approval process is to gather your income documentation. And the reason why we want that is the next numbers that we want to look at is your DTI, your debt to income ratio. And essentially what that means is we take all your debts, your monthly debts, including student loans, car payments, and we added it up and we divide it against your monthly income. And there's a number that pretty much gets you into if you're going to start or if you're not going to play in the game. They have what they call a front end and a back end ratio. And I don't want to get too complicated about it, but essentially that's very important because to a lender, we want to see, can you afford it with the new payment? Because if you've never bought a house before, you're going to have a sticker shock. You know, if you've never paid a $2,000 or $3,000 payment, and now you want to buy a house that's a monthly payment, including tax and insurance, is going to be $3,000. That's going to be a sticker shock, especially when you get your first mortgage payment. And you may be good for the first couple months until your savings run out because you've been subsidizing. So it's very important for a lender that we know what your DTI is, because it lets us know whether you're even eligible for the program.
Yep, yep. And so now we've talked about FICO, we've talked about debt to income ratio, which is pretty much what I make to what my monthly obligations are. Now, to clarify, he's talking about monthly payments. A lot of people will be like, well, I owe $3,000 in credit cards. No, that's fine. I want to know what your minimum payment is, because that's the factors you guys take into consideration.
Correct.
And the reason why that's important is because let's say you're in the stadium, but you're not in the game because your debt to income ratio is 60%.
Yeah.
He can then tell you, well, if you pay off X, Y, and Z, your ratios drop and now you're in the game. So now you have a plan on what needs to be paid off to be able to buy.
We do have the ability to, after we pull your credit, to run a simulation. The simulation would basically tell us, hey, if you paid off your American Express to this amount or you did this, it would basically improve your FICO score, and also at the same time, it'll let us know how we can improve your DTI, your debt to income ratio. And again, it's really for the lender to kind of gauge whether you even should be in the same ballpark. Like for example, it depends on the lender, it depends on the program. With FHA, their DTI is generally around 43. VA is about 41, and then conventional loans around 38. But there's a range for conventionals because it depends on the lenders. And when I say a range, some will want it to be under 41%. Now when I say 41, it means 41% of your actual debt versus your income. So that's what you want to do. You want to keep your overall debt as low as possible, okay? Because they want to make sure you can afford your
So
payments.
don't buy the new car till after you buy the house.
Oh, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. These are things that you should not do. Things is you should not go out and establish new credit, especially if you're already right there on the borderline. You should not max out your credit cards. You should try to do everything you can to reduce it. And you should also at the same time find ways to increase your income. By doing that, you're gonna lower your overall DTI and make you look better to the lender.
All right, so we got FICO, we got DTI, we got income. We already know what your monthly obligation is because they're on your credit. What else do we need to know?
Mortgage payment. Mortgage payment is a very important factor because especially when you're out there looking at a house and you're like, oh my God, this house is beautiful. But then when we run the numbers in terms of what the interest rate is going to be, and that's all based on your FICO score. So again, it goes back to the first thing. We want to make sure that you can afford the house payment, the taxes, and if there's an HOA, because all of those are really important because guess what? You pay it today, 30 days later, those same payments going to come up. So you got to make sure that you can qualify to the lender and also to yourself. I always tell people, don't buy a house more than you can afford. It's a house. It's not a home. A home is what you make of it with your family. So you got to be very, very important on the mortgage numbers. So going back, FICO is very important, DTI is very important, and mortgage payment is very important too.
Yep. All right. So now you know your numbers. With exception, so now you know what your FICO is, you know how much you can qualify for, because that's what he calculated based on that, what your mortgage was going to be. So now you know those numbers. The last number I would imagine you need is how much down, depending on the loan product.
Yeah, down payment is a very important part, but here's the good thing. A lot of times you may not have all your down payment. It's okay. We have down payment assistance programs out there. Depending on who the lender and what the down payment assistance programs are, a lot of them are silent seconds. It means that they give it to you and you don't have to pay it back until you either sell your home or refinance. But a lot of the lenders will also have programs where they'll give you a down payment assistance, usually for the down payment portion, but they may require you to pay a payment. Basically, you have two loans, a concurrent loan, a first and a second. Now that second, we do factor in part of your DTI. So you have to be very important about that part. You know, you gotta remember that it's not free. We're gonna include it with your debt, and we wanna make sure that you can qualify with that additional debt. But going back to the very last number is actually rental income. Because let's say you're buying a duplex, you can't, or a fourplex, which you're allowed to with FHA. You're gonna live in one. Now you have 3 additional units that are generating income. We actually use those additional rental units income to help you qualify, plus your income. So that actually helps you. So if you're deciding between buying a single family residence or a duplex, or if you're lucky enough to buy a 4-unit in this market, you should consider doing something like that too.
All right, so there you are. You now know your FICO, you now know your mortgage payment, and you now know your down payment amount. Now you're ready to start the home search process.
Yeah.
And then obviously once you find a house, and you'll get more exact numbers because now the lender has a purchase price, and based off that, they can give you updated information.
Right.
But you have to go through this before you can start searching.
It's a process.
It's a process. Don't go backwards. It's the worst thing you can do. Why fall in love with a house you can't afford? It makes absolutely no sense to me.
So many people done that.
And they all do it.
Yeah.
So now you know, our information is below. Give us a call. Let us know, hey, I'm ready to buy my house. What are my numbers? And we will start the process, all right?
Thank you, Paco.
Thanks, Dave.